Hi, I'm Yegi. I'm an entrepreneur and success coach who wants it all. Family, luxury, career, and the freedom to do whatever I want, whenever I want. And I'll do whatever it takes to get there. I created the Yegi Project to document my journey and inspire others to do the same. My mission is to change the world by influencing and leading others to do what they love and live fulfilled lives. Hello. Welcome back to the Yegi Project. I'm excited for this week's episode because we are going to address a secret for success. And you know, I thrive on this topic. I think it is very important to learn how to be successful and apply skills because there is an exact science to it according to Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, okay? If you haven't heard of this book just yet, we have mentioned it a few times on the podcast before. It is a super popular book, read more than 150 million times. And our guest today is another author named John Mitchell who uncovers the hidden or missing link in Think and Grow Rich. Okay, so the Think and Grow Rich book basically tells you the science to how to become rich. Today's guest, John Mitchell, is going to give us the full secret and a 12-minute exercise a day that we can apply in order to become successful. This technique caused him to 25x his income. So he was kind of stuck at a 300,000 a year flatline income for many years, for about 25 years in his life, until he figured this out, applied it, and he 25x'd his income. So it's definitely worth a try. So John not only has applied it and 25x'd the income in his own life, but he has vetted it. It is tested. He is currently running a curriculum and teaching it at one of the top 5 business schools in America. And he is also working with other coaches in the university with athletes to get them to optimal performance. Anyways, it has been tested and vetted. So make sure you listen along, learn what the secret is and the technique of how to apply it. Well, let's get to know John Mitchell and see what this missing secret is from Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. I'm going to give the floor to him because I don't even know his full story. He left me at a cliffhanger with his bio. But the bottom line is he's dabbled in many different businesses and industries, restaurants, publication, automotive, and I don't know how the story ends, where he ended up to find his fulfilling life where he can sit back, enjoy, and have money coming in from his investments, hopefully. But ideally, we all look for that life that we can really say we're fulfilled. We have enough money to do the things we want to do, yet still make an impact and a difference in other people's lives to get fulfillment from that as well. So without further ado, John, please introduce yourself. Tell us, who are you? And what do you do today?
Well, Yegi, thank you for that, and I appreciate it. And so I think your audience is going to find what I'm going to share with you interesting. Now, some of them, though, are going to find it life-changing, I dare say. Today, I teach the science of success, the science of leveraging yourself at the University of Texas Business School. And I'm also the mental coach for the 18 head coaches at the University of Texas. And so that's what I do today.
Right on track with our audience and myself. Those are the subjects that I get thrilled to talk about.
Okay. Well, and I'll tell you the backstory, basically. So I wasn't as successful as I thought I should be when I turned 50. And I started my career as a CPA. And by the time I got to be 30, I realized I didn't want to be a CPA anymore, and I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so I became an entrepreneur at 30, and in my 30s and 40s, I was in like 7 different businesses. But like I said, when I hit 50, just not as successful as I thought I should be. And Yegi, I had 2 goals in my life. One is to make enough money so I didn't have to work, and the other one was to find the woman of my dreams. And so I was falling short on both of them. And on the money, I always did pretty well as an entrepreneur. I always made 200, 300 grand a year. But when I hit 50, and I know this sounds materialistic, I realized I had to start netting $1 million a year. to
Well,
have
yeah,
the
if you want to sustain a certain lifestyle and able to do that when you retire without putting in all that work, that makes sense. I don't think a lot of people realize that. They think, okay, if I have enough money to pay my current lifestyle now, they don't realize how much it's going to take to sustain that in the long term as they retire. At least young entrepreneurs who are not thinking about retirement just yet.
right. Well, and to that point, I've been making 200, 300 grand. It seemed like whatever business I was in for 20 years, but maybe I was a lousy saver. I don't know. But I'm like, and this is the accountant coming out in me. I'm like, I can do the math. If you're not netting a million a year, you're never going to have the exceptional life. And then on the girl at 50, I'd never been married, although Yegi, I did a lot of interviewing. And right, right. Well, I called it interviewing. My friends called it begging, which is probably more accurate. But anyway, at 50, I'm like, how am I going to change things? And probably 3 months after I turned 50, a pearl of wisdom comes to me. Go find the top book in the world on success and apply that book literally word for word to my life.
Okay.
And so,
And what was this book, if you don't mind sharing?
well, I'm coming to that. So, just that idea of find the top book in the world on success and apply it word for word to my life was the idea. And so that night, I jump out of bed and do the research, and I discover there's one book that's been read by 150 million people now. And the next best selling book on success is a tenth of that number. So it's the top book in the world on success by a factor of 10. And that book is Think and Grow Rich, which I bet you've read, haven't you?
I have.
And so I'm excited. I'm like, wow, I had no idea that there was one book above all others by a factor of 10. I'm like, this is perfect. So I am like a heat seeking missile the next day, go out and buy the book and read the book. And then, Yegi, I discovered the problem. The book says there's a secret for success, but the author only gives us half of the secret. It's on the
Okay.
reader to figure out the other half. And so I'm bummed out. I mope around for 3 weeks or so. And one day I just get up and go, John, just man up, figure out the damn secret. And I then immerse myself in the book for 2 to 3 months and probably read it 20 times. And I
It's
ultimately,
honestly an easy concept with the book once you get it, but it's found that initially it was kind of a harder read. I don't know why. Maybe I read like the older version I don't know. Initially I did find it hard to get through, and then afterwards when I revisited I was like, why was it hard to get through this book the first time around? But I think it just has to click.
well, I find if you don't know what the secret is, it's hard. It really is hard. But once you know what the secret jumps out all over the place in the book. And so once I figured out the secret, I figured out a 12-minute a day technique to apply it. And I started applying it to a new business I was starting in the reverse mortgage field. And suddenly my income starts doubling and doubling and doubling to the point where 4 years later, I was blessed to be netting 25 times the 200 to 300 grand a year I was making the prior 20 years. And of course, I felt so incredibly blessed. But Yegi, what was so cool was I could see why it was happening. I mean, I could do things I couldn't do before. I was playing the game of life at a higher level.
Well,
And
I'm
I
going
had
to
a
stop you
just
right
a
there because I'm sure our audience right now are really wondering, okay, what is this secret? And what was you said 12-minute technique you did
right.
daily? So are you ready to share that or that's coming?
Well, that's coming.
Okay,
I think it's good to set the stage.
let's do it.
So as my income goes up by 25 times, really the cool thing was I could see I'm just playing the game of life at a higher level. I can do things I couldn't do before. I had a level of control over myself I'd never had before. And I became fascinated that you could take two key scientific principles and apply them to your life and so materially impact your success. And so about 10 years ago, I had enough money so I didn't have to work. And I sold my company and I thought, okay, I'm going to share this with the world. And I, probably a month or two after I sold my company, I meet the former chancellor and president here at the University of Texas. And he says, hey, you got to teach this at the University of Texas, and why don't we teach it together? And
Oh,
then he introduced me to the athletic director here at the University of Texas. And he says, well, I want to learn this 12-minute a day technique. And so I teach it to him. And that led to becoming the mental coach for the 18 head coaches. And so today I teach my methodology in the business school in a class called The Science of Success, the Science of Leveraging Yourself. And I teach it to adults through licensing my methodology to coaches and through my book. So that's a setup.
well, that's wonderful that a class like that even exists for people to I don't know, over 10 years ago when I was looking for anything out there to help me figure out how to be successful, there was no classes. There was
Right.
nothing direct, like straight, direct forward where somebody's going to teach you these life, the game of life as you called it. And that's amazing that that class exists. So congratulations on leading that class.
Well, it's interesting. I was with a trainer today who's like 25 years old, sharp guy, and he's an expert on fitness. And I was telling him, I said, there's a science to success. Just like there's a science to health, there's a science to success. And that's what I'd like your audience to get, is that there's a science to this thing.
So do you think once you teach us the methodology, what is the key factors that may hold somebody back? Since it is an exact science, what are the key factors that may hold somebody back from actually following it and becoming successful?
Well, that's an excellent question. And I think maybe the way to explain it is, let me ask your audience a question.
Okay.
Just think about this. How do you create success in your life?
Well,
Just think about that. How do you create success in your life? And Yegi, when I'm one-on-one with somebody and I ask that question, usually they stumble around for an answer because nobody's really asked them that question before. I see how valuable it would have been to have that question asked of me earlier in my career. And then the more pertinent question is, so how's that working for you? Well, oftentimes not that well. And what I see is that most people are just winging life. They don't have a way of doing life. They just get up, do the best they can. And the effect of that is they keep recreating their past. And if you dig into this just a little bit deeper, there's two fundamental problems that we all have to overcome that are unique to the human condition. The first problem as a human is that we are innately wired for survival, which causes the vast majority of our thoughts to be fear-based. And then the second problem
and that's
is,
just how we're built. Unless we're aware of it and we do something different about it, we can't really control it. That's just how we're built from our 100
Right.
years ago ancestors.
well, and think about it. If you are wired for survival and the effect of that is that you're fear-based and reactive, that's exactly the opposite of how you need to be in order to be productive, creative, and happy. So in my view, being innately fear-based and reactive is the biggest problem you have to overcome as a human being, okay? Then the second problem is that 95% of your daily thoughts and actions are unconscious. And so when you take those two fundamental human problems together, when you open your eyes each morning, hey, you're on autopilot most of the day, innately wired to be fear-based. And that stimulates that negative inner voice. And I'm just telling you, Yegi, that is a lousy, ineffective way to live. And I can say that because I lived that way for 50 years. But here's the
Unfortunately, we get stuck living that way because, like you said, we're trying to survive. We're either making ends meet to pay our bills, put food on the table, raise a family, get enough rest. So we just get so occupied with the day to day. We don't stop and ask that question as you did. Is like, okay, so what are you doing to be successful, right? So it's just not relevant unless somebody gives you a wake-up call. And your wake-up call was realizing, hold on, I'm 50. I've had some success, but I don't see my life the way I wanted to see my life. So something's got to change.
Well, and I say that people are winging life. Why are they winging life? Well, nobody sat down and said, here's an actual way to do life. And that's what my 12-minute a day technique is. And essentially, here's what it is. The solution to just winging life and being wired for survival is you feed the succinct articulation of your desired life to yourself each day. Exactly the person you want to be, exactly what you want to accomplish, and precisely how you're going to achieve your clearly defined goals. And when you do that, the right actions start happening automatically, and you have this powerful force pulling you forward to your desired life. And all it takes is 12 minutes a day. Does that
But
make
how
sense?
do you? It totally does because I've done work to get there. It makes sense to me. But initially, I do remember struggling with almost like, okay, these 12 minutes, I'm gonna try to create myself as this version of me that I want to see. Right? That's what I'm
Right.
trying to envision. But when you're at a lower place where your life is not what you want to be, a lot of people do feel kind of phony or not optimistic enough to even give it a try and say, okay, but like they say it, but they don't believe what they're saying. And I know from my experience, I know that can hold you back. Your emotions really need to align with
Right.
what you're saying for it to be effective. That's the challenge I've found in the past. Is there any tips you have for our audience who may be like skeptical of the process, or what can we teach them to help them get into that right state of mind before they get into this 12-minute exercise?
Right. Great question. Well, let me, as an overview, this is pure science. This works on everyone. If you're human, this works.
So even if I don't believe it, if I do it, it's going to work.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, okay, that's good clarification.
But let me now sort of get into what the secret is. And I think the easiest way to explain it to your audience is to share with you a story that's really highly personal to me, but that you'll understand the secret from this. So when I turned 50, there was a little more going on with me than just feeling the scarcity of time, because my mom was dying of pancreatic cancer. And she was probably in the hospital in Dallas for like 8 weeks. And so every day after work, I'd go see her and I'd hold her hand and love on her. And I'd spend a couple of hours with her. And Yegi, it was everything I could do to keep from just breaking down in front of her. And so every night after I'd go see her, I'd go in the cold, dark parking lot and cry my eyes out, like 45 minutes or an hour every night. And again, this is going on for like 8 weeks. And of course, I'm feeling the impending loss of my mom, but I knew it was something deeper than even that. And what I realized was I was letting my mom down with my life, because my mom and dad really gave me everything. They sent me to Jesuit high school in Dallas. They sent me to the University of Texas when I was 18, paid for everything. And at 50, as my mom is leaving this world, I'm reflective about my life. And I feel like I'm letting her down because all I had was an average life.
I
And I
see.
hated the average life.
I see. Especially that you had the right support from parents and opportunities to be above. So I could see that feeling. I mean, as children, a lot of times we do end up feeling like we are disappointing our parents. Maybe that might not be the case, but that's a whole other probably psychological conversation. But okay, so tell us what happened after that. So you're feeling like you could do way more and you
Well,
want
I think a lot of your audience has this feeling of there's more in the tank, but why can I not get it out?
why
Why
not
aren't
me?
my results reflective of my effort? And because I knew I was capable of so much more than making 200 grand a year. And so at the same time, I'm reading Think and Grow Rich. And what I realized is that the pain I was feeling of letting my mom down was like rocket fuel and causing me to go deeper into Think and Grow Rich than anybody on the planet ever had to figure out the secret.
I see.
And does that make sense?
Yeah, did it also put urgency because you felt like you had to do it so she could see it, probably? Is it a timeline
No,
thing for you?
when your mom's dying of pancreatic cancer, her time is limited.
Yeah,
But it was, that juxtaposition of my life with her life.
I
And to
see.
this point, all I could show her was an average life.
I see.
And then the secret really came to me during this time, one pivotal night. And so I had gone to see her in the hospital and spent a couple of hours with her and cried my eyes out in the parking lot. But Yegi, on this particular night, it was snowing in Dallas, and it doesn't snow very often in Dallas. And so it just felt different. And so as I'm driving home, I'm seeing the big snowflakes hitting my windshield. And I get home and I plop myself in my comfy chair and I start reading Think and Grow Rich again. And again, this is probably the 20th time I've read it. And on this one particular night in the book, it says, your success in life comes down to your daily actions. The cumulative effect of your daily actions determine your success in each area of your life.
And that sounds so simple right now when you're saying it.
Exactly. And you know that I'm glad you mentioned that because I had never thought of success in such simple terms. And I'm like, well, yeah, okay, I buy that. Again, never thought of it like that. And then the next thing I read is that 95% of your daily actions are unconscious. And I'm like, huh, that's interesting. And so now, Yegi, I'm ready to go to bed, and I, wash my face and brush my teeth, and I put my little head on the pillow. But I cannot stop thinking about 95% of my daily actions being unconscious.
Yeah, actually, I was not aware of that statistic. That's still a fact. 95% of our daily actions are unconscious on average, an
Absolutely.
average person. Yeah, see, that even now still surprises me. I'm sure I've read that and down the line, but it still doesn't register. 95% is a huge percentage of our actions being in our subconscious.
Well, I'm glad you've pushed back on that a little because what you see is that if you go and you Google what percentage of my daily actions are unconscious, it'll say in big dark letters 95%.
Okay.
And I see when I'm on a podcast every once in a while, I'll ask the host if they believe that, and oftentimes they'll say, "Yes, I do." And then I'm like, "Well, what are you doing about it?" I mean, if you understand that your actions determine your success, and 95% of them are unconscious, then what are you doing about it? And so, but to continue this, because I'm glad you sort of pushed back on that, and I'm going to explain to you in a minute why it's counterintuitive to believe that 95% of your daily thoughts and actions are unconscious. But I'll show you the science behind it and why it's true. And they don't make sense to you. But I remember, as I read that, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. If your daily actions determine your success and 95% of them are unconscious, I don't really control the very thing that's determining my success. And that sort of hit me like a bolt of lightning. And I remember, sort of sitting up in bed and I see the snow falling in my backyard, and it's sort of this surreal moment. And I think, well, what controls my daily actions then? Well, if 95% of them are unconscious, then it's my subconscious mind. It's my autopilot. And the subconscious mind is only responsive to repetition. And Yegi, this was so enlightening because all this time I had been only controlling my intentions with my conscious mind, not my actions, which were controlled by the subconscious mind. And that's when it really all clicked. And I realized, hey, I wasn't underperforming because I lacked intelligence or drive. I was underperforming because I had a false belief about success that I had had for 50 years. And that false belief was that I controlled my daily actions, when in
I
fact,
see.
that's
Well,
not the case.
honestly, it's still not talked about a lot. It's just this past maybe 5 years that more and more people are talking about the subconscious mind and
Right.
getting access to it through meditation. Before that, it's like, what is that? Even my close group friends, if I have this conversation with them, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like,
Right.
it's not a conversation that we're having on the regular. So it is kind of mind blowing to not know ourselves and how to control our lives. So I'm glad you're bringing it up and talking about it, because we actually don't talk about it that much on our podcast either to this level. So please go ahead and continue.
Well, and I'm glad you said that because every one of your listeners has the same exact problem that I had. I believed that I controlled my daily actions, and that false belief held me back. And once I got over that false belief, as I'm going to explain in a minute, whole new ball game, whole
Okay.
new ball game. And so
That's great news, listeners. It's not your fault. You just don't know what you don't know.
exactly, exactly. And so, as all this is coming to me, then the full secret of Think and Grow Rich comes to me. And here's the full secret: what you envision in detail with emotion on a daily basis is what shows up in your life. Now, let me say that again, Yegi. What you envision in detail with emotion on a daily basis is what shows up in your life. And
And
what
all our
that means,
listeners need to like pause and write that down.
well, yeah, I get that. So, but let me explain what that means because people sort of understand it. What that means is you create immense clarity about your life, exactly the person you want to be, exactly what you want to accomplish, and precisely how you're going to achieve your clearly defined goals. And you create that clarity, and you do this using a template that I created.
Okay, I'm glad you have a template, because honestly, I've done this exercise in the past quite a few times every time I've went through a pivotal moment in my life. And it's not easy. Sometimes it's really not easy clarifying even what we want and what plan we can come up with to achieve it. So I'm so glad you
Right.
have a template.
So you get that clarity about your life onto the template, and then you feed that clarity to yourself every day, either listening to it or reading it. And again, it takes 12 minutes a day. And once you do this, three things then happen. The first thing you experience is you have this immense sense of control over your life. Well, of course you would. You're feeding the succinct articulation of your desired life to yourself each day. Of course you'd feel control. And then the second thing you experience is confidence, which is directly related to control. But it also greatly reduces your stress because the mind thrives on order. And when you're feeding the succinct articulation of your desired life, it creates immense order in your mind. And then the third thing you experience is after 21 days, your autopilot is rewired, and then the right actions happen automatically without thinking. So that's
Wow.
essentially how it
So you have to work really hard, at least 21 days, to build the habit of doing the exercise. Then it'll become easier.
right, right. And I'll give you an example of this because so we've been, a couple of things you said I thought were very astute in that like when I explain what I do, and I'll say to people, well, the secret of Think and Grow Rich is to feed the succinct articulation of your desired life to yourself each day. They go, wow, that sounds pretty good. And then they think about it a little deeper and they go, well, I don't know the level of clarity that is required in each area of my life, right? And well, no problem, because I have created an AI algorithm where you just answer 50 questions, press a button, and 10 seconds later, my template is customized to your unique life. You don't have to figure out all the clarity. That's what I've done
Wow.
for 20 years.
Well, I'm actually excited to play around with that myself.
Okay, I fully expect you to.
I sure will.
But I'll give you an example because we've been talking sort of theory. But
Yeah,
here's an
because
example.
initially, I feel like initially when you ask somebody that question, success, if they haven't thought about it in detail and clarity, okay, money, freedom. That's all I hear initially, right? But
Right.
that's not very specific enough, because clearly everybody wants money and freedom or travel. Like that's the terms we use initially. So give us a more detailed example, please.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as an example, let's say, and this happened, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe. I have a client in Portland who decided to come to San Antonio and bring his girlfriend. And San Antonio is about an hour from Austin. And so it's around Christmas, and my wife, who I might add, I met my wife from doing this method about 2 years after I started, and that was way more impactful than 25xing my income.
Wow.
But
Congratulations, you've achieved your goals, your two main goals.
exactly. And so, anyway, I tell her to meet me at Starbucks at like 2 o'clock, and we'll jump in my car and drive to San Antonio. And so I get there a little early, and Yegi, it's Christmas time, and I decide, well, I'm going to have a brownie. And so I start eating the brownie. And one of the things I affirm in my 12-minute a day technique and on the template is I'm aware of everything I put in my mouth. Well, I was aware of eating that brownie. I was also aware that brownie didn't really taste that good. And nevertheless, that didn't stop me from eating it. So I finished the brownie. The gin shows up. We jump in my car, and I go, babe, I sort of lost my appetite. I don't really feel that good. And so, but we go to San Antonio, and that night we get back home to Austin, and I change one word in the template from I'm aware of everything I put in my mouth to I evaluate everything I put in my mouth. And so the next night we go have Mexican food with her son, and I ordered the tacos. The tacos come, they're not very good, except this time I'm evaluating everything I put in my mouth. And Yegi, I slide those tacos away, didn't
Stop.
have another bite. And as I'm laying in bed that night, I'm like, boy, if that's not a superpower, when you can get yourself to do the right actions without thinking, I don't know what is. Does that make sense?
You're almost programming yourself. Yeah, that's a great example.
Right, right. So, and I think one of the things that would help your audience is to understand the pure science behind this. And it's surprisingly simple. So here's how the human mind works. Conscious mind sets your intention and is influenced by logic. Subconscious mind controls your daily actions, or 95% of them, and it's only influenced by repetition. And let me give you an example. Let's say you want to lose weight. Conscious mind sets the intention to lose weight based on the logic of the health benefits. But the reason people fail to lose weight is not from lack of intention, but rather from failing to influence their daily actions of eating and exercising, and which 95% of them are unconscious. And so that's why when you feed the succinct articulation of your desired life and you're articulating your goals and the actions you got to take to achieve those goals, that's why if you're feeding that to yourself every day and it takes 12 minutes a day, after 21 days, the right actions just happen automatically. I mean, it's logical that that would happen.
Yes, it's actually mind blowing that it sounds so simple. I've learned about it, so I obviously believe it, but I can see myself like 10 years ago, if I were to hear this for the first time, we're talking about this 12 minutes, I'd be skeptical. It's like, okay, no, it can't be that simple. It can't be that simple that I write in a template. The AI tells me this is the clear vision, and 12 minutes a day, 21 days later, whatever, I start seeing all this change, right? It just sounds too good to be true. So for our skeptical listeners, you already said it's exact science. Do it and you will see the difference, right? You got to try it. But what other last minute or last words of encouragements would you give them to give it a shot? And where can they access the templates to get started?
Well, let me address that because I think what you said is exactly right. Now think about this. I'm blessed to teach this at one of the top 5 business schools in the country. And to get this approved to teach there, I think gives it a level of credibility
It
that few
definitely
people.
does.
But let me show you something that's cool. Do you use ChatGPT very often?
Yes, not super often, but I actually recently started using it pretty regularly.
So I use it all the time, and I'm going to show you something that's pretty cool. I call her G. So watch this. Hopefully she'll cooperate with us here. G, are you there? So I have a question for you. So is it really true that 95% of a person's daily thoughts and actions are unconscious?
Yes, research suggests means that much and habits formed over time, rather than conscious, deliberate thought. It's a widely accepted concept in neuroscience and psychology.
So I understand that what actually happens is that people first take an action, and then after they take the action, they consciously become aware of it. Is that correct?
This phenomenon is often discussed in the context of habitual actions and reflexes.
So what scientific evidence is there that support this?
There are studies that often initiates actions milliseconds before we, for example, experiments by Benjamin Libet in the 1980s demonstrated that readiness potential in the brain occurs before a person consciously decides to act. These findings suggest that a lot of our decisions and actions start at an unconscious level.
So give me a couple of examples of this.
Sure. One example is when you're driving a familiar route. You might find yourself arriving at your destination with little memory of the drive itself because your actions were mostly automatic. Another example is a habitual response like reaching for your phone when you hear a notification, often without thinking about it consciously.
Thank you. So, I think the power of that is we've now third party verified what I said is true.
Yes, and honestly, the two examples she gave were on point because all of us can relate to that, the driving and the phone these days. So
Right.
it's pretty much proves that we all do have some sort of programming that we are on autopilot for. Excellent. So now, before anything else, do you have anything else to add about the topic and the process?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you something that and sort of we touched base on it at the start. You'd find this fascinating. At least I found it fascinating. So about 5 years ago, I decided if I'm gonna devote my life to this, I'm gonna go find the top expert in the world on success, whoever he or she is, and show them what I created.
Like
This is
somebody today alive, present.
Yes, yes. And so I did the research and I came to the conclusion that Darren Hardy is the top expert in the world on success.
Really? Okay.
And I'm looking to see, is there anything similar to it? Is there any flaws in it? So, Yegi, I write a big check. I go meet Darren, and the moment comes to take my template and I put it in front of him, explain how it works. And he looks at it and he goes, John, this is good. In fact, this is really good. But he says, people aren't going to spend 12 minutes a day on this. And I'm
Really?
like, Darren, how the heck can that be? It 25x my income. Time magazine did a cover story on the science behind it. And we're applying the central concept of the top book of the world on success to people's lives. I mean, what do you mean they're not going to spend 12 minutes a day on it?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly the thought that crosses my mind right now. Why would you not do it if it's
Right.
if
Well,
it's
what he
not-
told me was powerful. He says, John, you're new to the success business. He says, the dirty little secret is that more success is merely a preference for most people. In fact, for 98% of people. And he says, this is only for the 2% that are really driven. And that's why I said at the start of our conversation that most of your audience is going to find this interesting. Some of them, though, are going to find it life-changing.
I see.
So, and that changed how going forward I pursued what I was doing. Like what ended up happening was he proved to be so profoundly right. I started going and finding people just like me,
Targeting that
entrepreneurs.
2% instead of everybody.
Right. And, people, entrepreneurs like me that are making a couple $100,000 that wanted to make $1 million a year. And I would make them a money back guarantee. If I can't double your income within a year, I'll give you your money back. Now they had to, at a minimum, be making $200,000 a year. But it worked every time. And after I'd done about 10 or 12 people, I document it with a video testimonial. And then it got to the point where I'm like, well, the leverage way for me to go forward is to license my methodology to coaches. And so that's what I do essentially.
That's excellent, honestly, because there's just so much time and so much of you, that amount of people you can help. So that's excellent that you can reach more people with licensing it.
Right.
Wonderful. Now, John, just to get to know you a little bit better, I think the subject's fascinating. Of course, it's my favorite subject. I've been obsessed with it for over 10 years, and I've done my own reading and research and application, trial and error, and I've had my success and failures with it. I think I'm still kind of in the learning process, too. I don't think I've 100% figured out my
Right.
method. But it'll be fun to get to know you. I like asking my guests, what is one thing that most people don't know about you?
That I play blues guitar.
Awesome. Nice mix.
Right.
And if you can change one thing with the magic wand in the world, first thing that comes to mind. It could be selfish.
Realize you don't know what you don't know.
Okay.
Can I add on that? Because
Yes.
you'd be a good one too. Ask you, do you mind if I ask you how old you are?
Yes, I'll be 35 in September.
Well, you are an enlightened 35-year-old.
Thank you
But
so much.
let me say this to you, and you give me your honest pushback on this. I realize that because I was this way when I was in my 30s and 40s. I'm like, I don't know what I don't know, and I'm like, what don't I know?
Yeah,
I mean,
somebody teach me.
I pretty well know everything. I mean, that's what I thought. And then I saw that, and this I think is true with people in general, when you get to be 50, you still don't know what you don't know, but you realize you don't know everything. And one of the things that I was doing just yesterday was writing down the 4 or 5 things that if I had someone in their 30s and 40s, here's the things you don't know that if you will learn them, it'll make your path way easier and you'll be way more successful. And I'll give you an example. You want an example of this?
Tell me those three, at least the 3 to 5 things that in your 30s, 40s, what do you think we know but we don't know?
Well, here's the first thing. You don't know how the human mind works,
Okay.
right? There, and that was the turning point for me in my life. Once I understood how the human mind works, whole new game. And another example is I didn't understand what doing my best was. All I thought in my 30s and 40s was it was effort. Well, when I got in my 50s, I was very observant of why did my income go to $5 million a year after 20 years of 200, 300,000 a year. And I saw that there were like 6 components to doing my best. One of them was being highly organized. I mean, a 10 on a scale of 10, where you're planning your day the night before and you're time blocking your day. And you're also setting aside time 2 times a week to think, to deep think. This is something the top entrepreneurs in the world do. And you also learn how to be a conduit of learning that's strategic relative to what you want to accomplish. I have a simple system, but there's 6 components of doing your best that I had no clue about when I was in my 30s and 40s. I just thought it was getting up early and doing my best.
Being busy, just doing busy work.
Right, right. Not working smart. And that's the essence of what I'm teaching people. You hear this idea of you got to work smarter, not harder, but nobody tells you how. Well, I got a 12-minute a day way to work smarter. And when you do it, it gives you an edge in life.
I bet. We can dive deep a little bit, maybe on a part 2 about this conversation, because I don't think the answer is that simple. But you talked about for a long time, 20 years, you were stuck at a certain bracket, 200, 300,000 revenue, and then you did 25x, got into the millions. Did you say millions or how did you, what was your leap?
Well, it was, like I said, the difference was I was doing life like everybody else. My philosophy in life, Yegi, is if you do life like everybody else, you're getting the average life. Count on it.
Of
So
course.
my philosophy is don't do what everybody else is going to do. The vast majority of people are not going to take 12 minutes a day to feed the succinct articulation of their life to themselves each day. They're not going to spend that 12 minutes. They're not going to spend the time to create the clarity, even though I make it easy with the AI algorithm.
How sad is that? But yes, I could see that. Initially, I don't comprehend that, because to me it's like, tell me what to do, I'll do it.
But here's the problem. This is the problem that I've faced, and because you and me are a lot alike. You're like, what's wrong with people? Sure, it's 12 minutes a day. You got all sorts of credibility, but the problem is you and I are looking at it from our point of view. We think everybody's like we are, and they're not.
That was a lesson I learned the hard way too. It would always shock me. It's like, what's wrong with you? But yeah, I had to realize that not everybody is like you. And once you accept that, you like people a lot more.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, we are running short on time. I love this conversation. Thank you again so much for your time and expertise on this subject. I think it's gold for our audience who's listening. I've learned a lot about it throughout the years, and it sounds promising. So I'm excited to play around with your system and see what it does for me. And I'll keep everybody posted. But as far as closing questions, first, where can people find you if they or your material? How can they connect with you? And then your last words of encouragement.
Okay. Well, I've got a special gift for your audience. I've created a 9-minute video that explains the full secret of Think and Grow Rich, explains the science behind it. And all you got to do is go to themissingsecret.org, www.themissingsecret.org. And you can get that free video. It also gives you access to my book if you're interested in that. The book has the algorithm in it. And
The book, if you have a minute, the title.
the title is the obvious title, The Missing Secret of the legendary book Think and Grow Rich.
Okay, excellent.
And like I said, the template is I give you access to the template through the book. So that's essentially how it works. My template has been 20 years in development. And as the mental coach for the 18 head coaches, I've been blessed to meet the top sports psychologists in the world, from Nick Saban's mental coach to Michael Gervais to names you probably wouldn't know, but are legends in the business, and they've helped me tweak the template.
Wow, that's excellent. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for backing it up with so much credibility. And again, thank you to our listeners for tuning in. But until next time, I think our last words of encouragement, John, and we can close.
Okay, well, here's the last bit of encouragement and a very quick story. So a few years ago, three or 4 years ago, I became a grandfather for the first time.
Congratulations.
I know, it's pretty cool. And so the day after my grandbaby was born, literally the next day, we go over to Hannah's house. Ginger and I go over there. And of course, there's a lot of oohing and ahhing about the baby. And for some reason, Yegi, they hand me the baby and then they walk away.
Have you ever held a baby before?
Well, I didn't have children of my own, so no, basically. So I'm feeling the warmth of this baby girl that's a day old, and I'm holding her in my arms, and Yegi, I start to cry. And I'm really realizing how precious her life is. And she's going to live to be 100 years old.
Minute system.
Right. She's a day old. And I realize she's going to live to be 100 years old. And the quality of her life and the happiness of her life is going to come down to the thoughts that are going on in her head most of the time. And I'm like, by God, I'm going to impact her ability to control her mind so that she can have a great life. And so the message to your audience, just like my precious grandbaby, is that your life is precious. And so tonight, when you put your head on the pillow, just think, if the next 5 years are like the last 5 years, will you be happy with that? And if the answer is no, you got to stop just winging life. You now have a way to change it, to create the life you desire, and it just takes 12 minutes a day.
Honestly, that's beautiful, and I wish everybody would share this with their friends too, and because ultimately I really do think happier people are the ones who are going to change this world towards the better. So hopefully we can all do our part and spread this message, and everybody can live happily and impact more of the world. Thank you again, John, for your time, and thank you to our audience. Until next time, bye. Thank you for listening. Please rate and review this podcast. Follow and engage with us on social media under the Yegi Project. And if you're interested in being a guest, email info@theyegiproject.com. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes.